Hey, everybody. It's Bob Goff here. Welcome to the Dream Big podcast. So glad that you're joining. Hope it's been a great week. I hope you've had your head on a swivel, looking for all the beautiful stuff. You're going to find what you're looking for. If you're looking for a bunch of cynics, you'll find them. And if you're looking for a bunch of hope, you're going to find that. And you're about to find some hope here. I have Emmanuel Acho on with me today. And Emmanuel, welcome to the podcast. I'm just so delighted that you're with us.
It's an honor, my friend. I feel like I've known you for years now since I started reading and getting familiarized with your work. So I'm most excited about this conversation, brother.
Man, you are joy on wheels. Whenever I want like a little pick me up, I'll just find something you're putting up. But you also have gears. Like you can actually say, hey, we got to talk. Let's have some conversations. But somehow you navigate that with joy and hope. And what I would say about you is you're a guy who's safe, but they're just fiercely committed to the things you're committed to, but you do it with joy. Tell us, for people that don't know you, like, what's a little your background? Like, how did you get here?
So, son of Nigerian immigrants. My dad moved to America in the late 70s, my mom in the early 80s. My dad's a pastor, has a church out in Dallas, Texas. My dad also has his doctorate in psychology. He's been a marital counselor for 40 years now. My mom has her doctorate in nurse practitioning. Bob, if you know anything about Nigerians, it is education, education, education.
Come on. Yes.
You hear growing up, you must be a doctor, you must be a lawyer, you must be an engineer. That is what you will hear in a Nigerian household. But Bob, I ended up being 6'2", 240 pounds. So I was like, oh, I'll play football. I went to a private school in Dallas, Texas. It was a all-boys private school, gray slacks, white button-down. St. Mark's School of Texas is the name. I'm the youngest of four total. One older brother, Sam Acho. He also went to St. Mark's, went on to play football at Texas. He went on to play 9 years in the National Football League. I went on to play football at Texas. I went on to play 4 years in the National Football League. And then I have two older sisters as well. 9 college degrees between the four of us. So you can see there's education.
You're carrying on the tradition.
The highest priority, Bob. So that's kind of me. I left football at the age of 25 after 4 years in the NFL. What people don't realize, Bob, after 4 years in the NFL, you have all the benefits: vested, pension, and annuity. And so after those 4 years, I said, well, let me move on to somewhere where I might be able to excel. Stumbled into television, and the rest has written itself.
Yeah. And you've actually just created so much impact because, again, it's that joy, and it's not something that is just ginned up. It's something that's actually like it bubbles up from within. I know faith is important to you and guide your step. Is that something that has always been important? Was that like from a little boy, or was there something where you started owning your faith a little bit later in life?
Great questions. I didn't start owning it until college, but I vividly remember I was 7 years old. I had just left Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, where Dr. Tony Evans is a senior pastor. And my dad was a pastor there for 24 years. My dad was an associate pastor there. I just left church, Bob. I'm 7 years old. I run out home, and I'd heard this invigorating childhood sermon, though I couldn't spell invigorating at 7. Don't know if I can spell it now, honestly. I walk outside my house, Bob. I'm in Richardson, Texas, and I'm like, Jesus, I love you. And that was when I really can say that I remember coming to the faith. Like, was at that point where God and Jesus became real to me. But when you go to Austin, Texas, you're 17 years old, and you play football, that's when your faith has to become your own. That's when you have to choose who you're going to serve, if you will. And so it wasn't until I was 17 at the University of Texas with the world in my hands that I had to make that decision every day.
Yeah, I remember it was kind of post-college for me that faith started feeling real to me, because I was under this impression that I was supposed to be my dad. And he's a great guy. He's 96. He lives next door to me. But I got in my mind, I was supposed to be him. And I realized in just post-college, I'm like, actually, I'm supposed to be me. And we're very different. I'm like running around, no eyebrows because they burned off in the last explosion. And He's a very like, kind of like more conservative in his approach and all that. And so for people that are listening, that you're never going to be who like God turned you in if we keep
Mm,
trying to be like somebody else. And
mm.
God never compares what he creates. He just creates. And then leave all the comparison. If you're tending to like look over at somebody else's paper, just don't, to see what it is that God's doing. Did you feel like a pressure to conform a little bit when you're leading and you're getting Emmys and all that for all of your broadcasting? Like, so did you feel a pressure suddenly to be somebody that you weren't?
I'll say no, but the reason I'll say no is because like the pressure for me primarily came from the Christian community. Because when I'm having these uncomfortable conversations of racial reconciliation and all these things, I would have people call me up, especially, I'm from Bible Belt, Texas, down south. People would call me and they say, Emmanuel, it's not about race, it's about grace. Emmanuel, it's not about skin, it's about sin. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay,
Any alliteration, it's just like anything that rhymes, run.
whatever, all of it. And I was like, okay, you're right. It's about both. It is about it's a grace issue playing itself as a race issue. It's a sin issue playing itself out as a skin issue. The pressure to conform only came from like, maybe I should do more preaching, if you will. But I had a conversation with the pastor and he told me, Bob, true story. He said, he's a big time pastor. He said, don't you ever get behind the pulpit. He said, don't you ever get behind a pulpit. He said, this is your pulpit. He said, and you can reach more people from this platform than you could if you were to stand behind a pulpit in a church. And so that moment, it instantly disarmed my desire to conform because I said, you know what? I am where God has positioned me to be, and I am speaking in a manner that God has positioned me to speak in. And true story, I don't know if you've seen this. I tagged you in it though. I'll hear different pastors speak and I will take that message and try to conform that message to give it to people who might not ever walk into church. You may never walk into church, but I'm going to give you the same message that pastor gave me. I'm just going to position it in a manner that you can understand. So one of your strongest words that's ever resonated with me, I think was from Everybody Always, catch them on the bounce. Oh,
Yeah.
You can go, I think it might be one of my pinned reels, if I'm not mistaken, on Instagram. And
Oh my gosh.
when you said it, it was so eloquent. But people who may never read your book, I was like, nah, that word's too powerful. And so I literally positioned it and, 2 million views later, everybody's like, that's so profound. And I'm like, I think I tagged you, or at least I put an at the end.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, because it comes from the text, if you will, but y'all might not ever read the text. So I'm going to meet you where you're at. So yeah, I didn't feel the need to conform after I heard that word. Don't ever get behind a pulpit.
Yeah, I like that. That sometimes we have this idea that we need permission or we need a status or something that we already have. I know when we first met, I just felt like I delighted in you and I felt like you delighted in me. And it's more than just being pleasant. It's just like delighting. And when we delight in each other, even people that are coming from a different place, then people feel safe. I think the reason that you can have difficult conversations about important topics is that the first thing they meet when they meet you is just delight.
Yeah.
And so if we could do that, that's not like some sappy, like, you're so swell thing. It's that people feel safe. And when I feel safe, then I can say, okay, I know I'm safe in this conversation. You wouldn't do something to hoodwink me. So let's have a safe conversation. If we could lead with delight, there would be something beautiful in that. How have you navigated getting when you have some pushback? I know when I wrote a book recently, somebody called up and said, "Are you watering down the gospel again?" And I said, "Yes." Just, if you're not thirsty, you're going to hate this. So like the whole idea of Jesus, he points to two sheep and he says, it's like when one of those gets away and everybody was like, I know exactly what that means. He didn't sit kind of with people in rows in front of them. It said the Sermon on the Mount, it said he went out and sat among them, and there was no smoke machines and no PA systems. And it's just like, blessed are the poor. And
Yeah.
then I bet somebody 5 rows back said, what did he say? Like it said, he said, blessed are the poor. And then I just love that way of communicating with, like, big stages are not for me. Like they're not bad. That's just for somebody else. Give me a fire pit where we can just like have a conversation, get to know each other. So how do you, with a really large group of people that you're talking to, what are you thinking about when you're misunderstood and there's a little pushback? Like what's your thing? I think that'll help us all, because we're entering a season where there's going to be a lot of people that feel really on the edge.
I think what I had to learn, Bob, and I had to learn this the hard way, is that you aren't for everybody and everybody ain't for you. And that's what I had to learn. You're not for everybody and everybody's not for you. If you try to appeal to all people all of the time, you will end up appealing to no one. And more importantly than anything, you won't even like yourself. And so the hard part, what I had to realize is, wait, Emmanuel, if you don't like everybody, how can you expect everybody to like you? But it's hard because so often I'm like, well, my words are meaningful and they're coming from a good place. I want everybody to like me and I want everybody to agree, but that's not the case. I believe that I am called, and we're all individually called to serve different groups of people. Not to get too biblical, but that's why you had Peter, you had Paul. Certain people were called for certain people. And so that's the hard reality I had to learn, Bob, because at first I was like, why doesn't everybody agree with what I'm saying? I mean, I'm only preaching love and kindness, and not even preaching. I'm only speaking love and compassion and truth and grace. But once I realized I'm not for everybody, it made it a lot easier to walk in my shoes.
Yeah. You're going to be misunderstood. Next week we're back up at San Quentin. I've been teaching a class there for years and years and years and years. And the guys that go to the class actually get some time off their sentence. Most of the guys are in for life, so it doesn't make a big difference. But some of the guys are in for a little bit shorter than that. And over the years, I think I've had 700 guys at San Quentin in the class. So it's old home week. When I walk through the yard, it's like, Bob. So I brought sweet Maria Goff, who's pretty reserved, with me, and she was totally freaked out. She's like, oh my gosh, and all these guys have our address. But it's been so beautiful to, again, sense their delight when I walk in. When you walk into a room, think about that with either work colleagues or the people that you're with. If we can, again, I'm back to creating that safe place, then even though people are a little bit on edge, that we can calm that down. I think that's just good advocacy.
Yeah. You use that word delight a lot, and I love it. And I also think so much is predicated upon people knowing you genuinely care about them. Like you genuinely love them. You genuinely because I truly live by, man, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. And once I know that an individual cares about me, it makes it so much easier to delight in their presence, because I understand they're coming from a place of good. It might feel bad. It might sound bad. It might make me feel bad, but it's coming from a place of good. And I think we just have to focus more on, at least in my mind, even in this life, is letting people know, like, no, we actually care about you. And we have to focus on caring about people.
Yeah, there's a Philippians 2:20. It's Paul talking about Timothy behind his back, and he says, there's nobody like Timothy. He's a guy who takes a genuine interest in the people around him. Now, I got a neighbor. Everybody has a neighbor story, and one of my neighbors lets their dog out to do all kinds of things on my lawn. But in addition to that, they bark a lot. And I'm just kind of like a peaceful guy. Like I've got a lot of energy, but when I'm at home, I just want to kind of chill out. So instead of like getting uptight about that dog, I like figured out what kind of a dog it was. And then I figured
Yeah.
out how those dogs are like great house pets and how those are great. So just taking an interest instead of thinking like big eye roll, like,
Yeah.
dude, can you like not do that? But to put a different spin on it, maybe take some of the people that have a different worldview than you, that's born out of a different life experience. And then from that, they made up some rules, whether they were true or not, that supported stories that they made up about one thing or another. I'm just trying to think, even for myself, I make up a story, even as a young man, I will be abandoned, like everyone will leave me. And it wasn't true because everybody didn't leave me, but some wonky stuff happens to all of us. And I got that in my mind. So then the rule I made is I'm not going deep with anybody.
Mhm.
And so now I'm 20, can't get a date because I'm like in the top 2 feet of every relationship. And people that actually would want to do that, a relationship, want to go deep. And so the rules, while they protect your like fragile little heart at 8, aren't serving you at 20. What are
Yeah.
some of the rules that you made up about how life worked and how did those change? Maybe they were like a helpful rule at one point in your life, and you need to revisit that rule to say, you know what, actually, I don't think I'm going to be abandoned.
Man, that's one of the best questions. It's interesting. You're telling such a good story. I was locked in on the 8-year-old and the 20-year-old that I didn't really think about it and internalize it for myself. Um, that's a great question. I
It
want to
might have
give you
been
the
rule about what success looked like. When I was, education was a big deal around our home, but I wasn't like very sharp. I wasn't
Mhm.
like, I was a happy guy dealing with all my insecurities. The way I dealt with feeling really insecure is just be the happy guy. I want to be the happiest guy in the room. If I was just nice, then maybe nobody would leave.
You know what? Now that I really think about it, I would probably say toughness and the facade of toughness. I grew up playing sports and playing football. And before that, I grew up in a Nigerian household. I've seen my dad cry twice, I believe. Once when his mom died, and once maybe when his brother in law died. Twice. And so you grow up in a Nigerian household, and even the country of Nigeria, tears aren't really a thing that's normalized.
I
Then you
didn't know
come up
that.
in America, and it's still like toughness, toughness, toughness. Then you play football, tough, tough, tough. And that is incredibly necessary on the football field, incredibly necessary, professionally, collegiately, and under the high school level. And it's to some degree necessary for a first generation immigrant. My dad comes to America with nothing. You ain't got time for no feeling sorry for yourself. But Bob, as I've gotten older, I've realized like I don't need that fake armor anymore. Because who am I protecting myself from? I'm not on a football field. I don't have to take on 6'4", 330-pound offensive linemen that are trying to drive me into the ground. I don't have to. I don't have to
Yeah.
parade around society with this facade of being machismo. I don't have to. So I would say what I've now learned, what no longer serves me as this facade of toughness. Now I enjoy crying. Like I will seek out an opportunity to emote. You know what I mean? Like if I know I'm just feeling
Yeah.
heavy, I'll listen to a couple worship songs that I already know might get me there, and I just enjoy. Like, oh man, I just had a good cry. Like I just like, you know what I mean? In the
Yes.
same breath that I might have a good celebration of something or have a good elation of something. Like, nah, like, oh, I literally am like, I just had a great cry because I know how tough I am and how tough I've proven myself to be. And I'm so secure in my toughness that, dude, I don't at all care when I cry and I seek it out because I'm not insecure about it.
Yes, I'm gonna send you that clip from Rudy, like, have him take my place, coach. And so
Exactly.
I can't get through that one without crying a little bit. Um, if we could figure out what the stories are, we can figure out the rule that we made around that, how we guarded our heart. This Proverbs 4:23. It's important to guard your heart, but then sometimes we encase our heart. We say, I'm not letting anybody in. because of this. Or if there's conflict, conflict equals unsafe place equals like flee the room. That I think your ability to be vulnerable, authentic, to delight in people, just like I felt your delight when we jumped on, that we can just create a place where we can now say, now that we're safe, can we leave the rules to the side for a moment? Can we leave some of our internal biases that we may be aware of or not aware of to the side and just have a conversation and say, if it's safe, you're the guy. You have a series of like books and other things that you're really well known for about like just having difficult conversations. Tell us about that.
Man, well, the impetus, it all started Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man. That was a video series in 2020 in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And Bob, I really was trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I speak up in this moment? What would Jesus be doing? Where would Jesus be? Like, and I just said, I want to be a bridge. I want to be kind of a vessel of reconciliation. And so, Bob, I started the first episode in Austin, Texas. I just was living in Austin at the time. I found a studio. I called my best friend, who's an Olympic sprinter. She stood in as my producer, true story. A wedding videographer, he stood in as my video team. And we shot the first episode. It was just me answering 4 questions. Why are Black people rioting? What is going on in society? All these things. And within 4 days, Bob, I had 25 million views. I get a call 4 days later from a no caller ID number. I pick it up. Acho, McConaughey speaking. I want to have a conversation. I was like, McConaughey? Turns out Matthew McConaughey saw the episode. He wanted to sit down with me. True story, Bob. I say, okay, let's sit down in 3 or 4 days. He says, tomorrow. I want to talk tomorrow. When the Academy Award winner says he wants to sit down with you tomorrow, you clear your schedule.
Yeah,
but here was the problem. Here was the problem to everyone listening. The studio is supposed to be all white. I shoot in an all-white studio. I called the owner of the studio. I said, hey, Matthew McConaughey called me. He wants to sit down. He wants to use our studio. He wants to do it tomorrow. The owner said, Emmanuel, I have an issue. What do you mean you have an issue? She said, the studio is currently painted sky blue. It takes 24 hours to repaint, and it takes 24 hours to dry. Bob said, well, I said, we don't have 48 hours. McConaughey said he wants to shoot tomorrow. She said, I have an idea. So, Bob, we drive around the city of Austin, and we find an all-white sheet of paper. We take the sheet of paper, and we roll it all the way down from the ceiling to the floor, and we cheat the camera so that it appears that McConaughey and I are in this all-white room. Well, we shoot that episode. 5 days later, I got another call from another no-caller ID number. I pick it up. Hi, Emmanuel. Oprah Winfrey speaking. I said, Oprah? Oprah says, she asked me one question, Bob, when we talked. She says, Emmanuel, what is your intention? I'll never forget. I respond, Bob, I say, Oprah, my intention is to change the world, and I truly believe I can. I'm currently working on writing a book. She said, books? I love books. And so Oprah and I partner together to write Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. Debuts at number 3 on the bestsellers list, behind serendipitously Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights book at the time.
Oh, good.
Then we write Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy, which debuts at number 1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. And then Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, my latest book, comes out April 30th. And that will be kind of tackling anti-Semitism in society and focusing on the marginalized Jewish community and some of the tension in that world that exists right now. So that book can be pre-ordered on all my social media channels and those links. So that is kind of the impetus of Uncomfortable Conversations, and then where we are now.
Yeah. So let me just address this for our friends that are listening. There might be something like when we teed up the uncomfortable conversations with these folks or these folks or these folks that may press a button. You may, if you just like felt a little bit anxious there, you'd be like, oh, or you felt like, oh, not another guy who, whatever. This is what I want you to do. I want you to lean in. I want you to say, like, Emmanuel, I delight in you. And if you knew it was a super safe place to say no agenda other than, can we just figure some stuff out? Can we just have a conversation? Then all of a sudden it is, you don't feel like somebody's working you, like towards something. We're just delighting in one another and having a conversation. And I think if we could get there, we can actually hear people. Now, it won't mean you agree with everything, but I want you to say, for something you disagree with and something you do agree with, I want you to say, is there a story in my past that made me create a rule that now has turned into a belief system that maybe I'd be willing to just think about? And if you knew that Emmanuel delighted in you when you were listening, then I think it would be like a possibility of doing it. And then here's the deal. You have some stories to tell. You're not just listening to this. I want you to go out and delight in somebody else and then speak a little bit of truth and love over them. And I think that's what we're going to do. It ain't going to be a political solution or religious solution. It's going to be the power of love released into the world. And if faith guides your steps, you may say, eyes fixed on Jesus. And that's awesome. And if your love for humanity lights you up, be like, awesome, me too. But to say, can we just have the conversation? So, Emmanuel, thank you for making the time. I'm just so delighted. I'm not big on tattoos, but that's the one I think I'd go with. I just be, if we could walk around with a little delight, it's something small, something big, the stupid dog that's barking next door. But I could tell you the like manufacturer of that dog. I know the brand. Take a genuine interest, open up and see what God might do in your life. You guys, you've been listening to the Dream Big podcast. I'm so glad you spent a couple minutes with us, and I just get your head on a swivel, find some delight around you, find some people, have this safe conversation, be the safe place to have that conversation. We'll talk to you next week.